Jake Thompson stared at the detention slip in his hand, reading the words over and over. Room 204, 3:30 p.m. He couldn't believe his bad luck, all because he was 5 minutes late to class. Again. The empty school hallways felt different after hours. His footsteps echoed against the walls as he walked slowly towards the detention room. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, making everything look strange and unfamiliar. "At least I'll have the room to myself," Jake muttered, reaching for the door handle. But as he pushed open the door, he froze. Someone was already there. In the back corner sat Zix, the quiet exchange student who had joined their class 3 months ago. Jake had never spoken to them before. Nobody had. Zix always sat alone, never talked unless teachers called on them, and disappeared right after classes ended. Jake chose a seat near the middle of the room, not too close to Zix, but not too far either. Mr. Peterson, who was supposed to watch them, wasn't there yet. The clock on the wall showed 3:28 p.m. The silence felt heavy. Jake pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. Weird, since he usually had perfect reception in school. He glanced back at Zix and noticed something odd. Their skin seemed to have a faint bluish tint in the afternoon light. Must be a trick of the sun, Jake thought. The minutes ticked by. 3:35 p.m. Still no Mr. Peterson. Suddenly, a soft humming sound filled the room. Jake looked around, trying to find its source. The sound grew louder, and then he saw it, a strange blue light seeping in from under the classroom door. Zix, Jake said, speaking to his mysterious classmate for the first time. "Are you seeing this?" Zix was now standing, their eyes fixed on the door. "We need to hide," they whispered, their voice carrying an accent Jake had never heard before. "They found me." "They? Who's they?" Jake asked, his heart beginning to race. The blue light was getting brighter, making the whole room glow like it was underwater. Zix moved quickly to the windows, trying to open them. "Locked," they said, their voice tight with fear. "All locked." The humming grew even louder, and now Jake could feel it vibrating in his chest. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, making him shiver. His phone was dead now, the screen completely black. "What's going on?" Jake demanded, standing up so quickly his chair fell backward with a loud crash. "Who are you really?" Zix turned to face him, and Jake gasped. Their skin was definitely blue now, with small patterns of light moving beneath it like circuits on a computer board. Their eyes had changed too. They were completely silver, with no pupils at all. "I'm sorry," Zix said, their voice changing to something more mechanical. "I never wanted to put any humans in danger, but now you're involved." Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, getting closer to their room. The blue light under the door pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake could see shadows moving in that light, shadows that didn't look human at all. "Quick," Zix whispered urgently, moving to the teacher's desk. "Help me block the door." As Jake rushed to help, his mind racing with questions, the footsteps stopped right outside. The door handle slowly began to turn. The last rays of sunlight disappeared behind storm clouds that hadn't been there minutes ago, plunging the room into darkness except for the pulsing blue light. Jake's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Through the blue light under the door, he could see multiple pairs of feet, but they weren't feet at all. They looked like metal, with strange joints and clicking parts. Zix grabbed Jake's arm. Their touch was ice cold. "Whatever happens next," they whispered, "don't make a sound." The door handle finished turning with a loud click. The door burst open with a blast of cold air, but instead of metal monsters, there was nothing. The hallway was empty except for swirling blue mist that floated like water. "They're scanning," Zix whispered, pulling Jake behind the teacher's desk. Their blue skin was glowing brighter now, pulsing in a pattern that matched the mist. "The hunters can't see us if we stay in the dark corners." "Hunters?" Jake's voice cracked. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. What hunters? What are you? Zix's silver eyes dimmed slightly. I'm what you would call a refugee. My people, the Luminary, we're being hunted across the galaxy because of what we can do. They held up their hand, and tiny points of light danced between their fingers like miniature stars. The blue mist was creeping into the room now, moving against gravity, climbing up the walls like living paint. Where it touched, frost patterns formed on the surfaces. The school cameras, Jake suddenly remembered. They'll see us. Look again. Zix pointed to the camera in the corner. Its red light was dead, and frost covered its lens. The hunters emit a field that disables all Earth technology. Your whole school is blind now. A metallic screech echoed from somewhere in the building, followed by heavy thuds that shook dust from the ceiling. They're checking every room, Zix explained, their voice trembling. Breaking down doors. We need to move. Move where? We're trapped. Jake looked around desperately. Then he noticed something strange. Where Zix's hand touched the floor, the tiles seemed to become slightly transparent, like glass. Zix saw him looking. My people can phase through solid matter, but... They hesitated. I can only do it for a few seconds, and never tried with a human before. Another crash, closer this time. The blue mist was getting thicker. Through the floor, Jake asked, his eyes wide. Actually through it. The science lab is directly below us, Zix said. But you have to trust me completely, and it will feel very strange. The thuds were getting closer. Third door down the hall. Second door. If we stay, the hunters will find us, Zix continued. They're not just looking for me anymore. They'll take you too now. Any witness is a threat. Jake looked at the door, then at Zix's glowing hand extended toward him. The next crash was from the classroom next door. What exactly will they do if they catch us? He asked. Zix's silver eyes met his. They collect specimens, living specimens, for study. The door to their classroom rattled. Ice crystals began forming around its edges. Okay. Jake grabbed Zix's hand. It felt like touching a static electricity ball, making all his hair stand on end. Do it. Zix pulled him close, their light growing blindingly bright. Take a deep breath, they whispered. And whatever happens, don't let go of my hand. The floor beneath them began to shimmer like water. Jake could see the science lab ceiling through it, getting clearer by the second. The classroom door exploded inward in a shower of frozen splinters. Jake saw 3 tall figures step through the mist. Their bodies were like liquid metal, constantly shifting and flowing. Multiple red eyes glowed in their featureless faces. Then gravity disappeared, and Jake felt himself falling through solid matter. Zix's hand the only real thing in a world that had turned to light and shadow. The last thing he heard before they phased through the floor was one of the hunters making a sound, not mechanical at all, but like an ancient predator that had just found its prey. They were falling, and the science lab below was rushing up to meet them. They crashed through the science lab ceiling like ghosts passing through mist, but landed like very solid humans. Jake hit the floor hard, while Zix somehow landed gracefully beside him. Never doing that again, Jake groaned, his whole body tingling like he'd been shocked. He could still see through his hands, which were slowly becoming solid again. That was quiet. Zix pulled him behind a lab counter. Their blue glow had dimmed to almost nothing, leaving them in darkness. Above them, heavy footsteps paced the classroom floor, making ceiling dust rain down. Jake's whisper was barely audible. What did you mean about collecting specimens? Zix's silver eyes darted around the room, checking exits. The hunters. They're not just hunters. They're collectors, gatherers of unique species. They touched their chest where a small crystal hung on a chain. My father gave me this before they took him. He was a researcher, studying Earth cultures. The collectors raided our observation post. A loud sniffing sound came from above, like a giant metal hound catching a scent. They collect anything unique, Zix continued, their voice shaking. And humans are very unique. Your brains can do something almost no other species can. What's that? Jake asked, dreading the answer. You can imagine things that don't exist. Create stories. Make art. Most species only process what's real, but humans. Zix's eyes glowed brighter for a moment. You dream. The ceiling creaked. Something was starting to melt through it. Drops of liquid metal that moved like mercury. We need to move, Zix whispered. The science lab has chemicals. Might slow them down. They crawled between lab benches while the metal drops gathered into a growing puddle on the floor. Jake grabbed what he could. Sodium bottles, acid containers, anything that looked dangerous. The collectors put species in special chambers, Zix explained as they worked. Keep them alive for centuries, studying how their minds work. They'd collected thousands of species. My father, he's still alive up there somewhere, in their ship. The puddle of metal was taking shape now, forming into a tall, shifting figure. Two more were starting to come through the ceiling. The door's too far, Jake whispered. We'll never make it. But Zix was staring at something else, the emergency shower in the corner. Their silver eyes widened. Jake, what happens to sodium when it touches water? Jake remembered his chemistry classes. It explodes, but... And what happens to these hunters when their liquid metal bodies are disrupted? The first hunter was fully formed now, its red eyes scanning the room. The other two were halfway through the ceiling. We'll have to time this perfectly, Zix said, gripping the sodium bottles. They placed their glowing crystal in Jake's hand. If something goes wrong, this crystal can send a distress signal. Just squeeze it and think about danger. My people will find you. What do you mean, if something goes wrong? Jake clutched the crystal, which felt warm and seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. The hunter turned its liquid metal head toward their hiding spot. It made that predatory sound again, like ancient hunger given voice. Now, Zix shouted, throwing the sodium bottles at the hunter while Jake lunged for the shower handle. Water sprayed down just as the bottles hit the hunter's fluid body. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the world exploded in light and sound. The sodium reacted violently with the water and the hunter's liquid metal form. Its body began to break apart, red eyes flickering in panic. The explosion sent waves of force through the room, shattering beakers and windows. But something went wrong. The blast was stronger than expected. As Jake was thrown backward, he saw Zix get hit by a spray of liquid metal. Their blue glow flickered like a dying light. Run, Zix gasped, their voice distorting. The metal was spreading across their body. The crystal. Use it. The other two hunters dropped from the ceiling, their forms rippling with what looked like anger. Jake scrambled away from them, clutching the crystal so hard his hand hurt. I'm not leaving you, he shouted at Zix, whose light was almost gone now. You have to. Zix's voice was barely a whisper. But I promise, this isn't the end. The crystal in Jake's hand began to glow brightly, pulsing faster and faster. The hunters moved toward him, their metal bodies flowing across the floor like a tide of living mercury. The last thing Jake saw before the crystal's light engulfed him was Zix's silver eyes, still shining with determination even as the liquid metal covered them completely. The crystal's pulse reached a peak, and reality itself seemed to bend around Jake. The hunter's reaching hands passed through empty air as Jake felt himself being pulled somewhere else, somewhere impossibly far away. His last thought before the world disappeared was a promise. He would find a way to save his friend, no matter what it took. Then the light took him, and the science lab vanished in a flash of impossible colors. Jake's body rematerialized in a place that shouldn't exist. He was floating in what looked like the inside of a giant crystal, surrounded by shifting rainbow lights. His stomach lurched as gravity seemed to come from all directions at once. Hello. His voice echoed strangely, like he was speaking underwater. The crystal in his hand was now pulsing with a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. 6. Connection established. A voice filled the space, speaking in 1,000 whispered echoes. Emergency protocol activated. Human presence detected. Initiating safety protocols. The rainbow lights concentrated into a sphere in front of Jake. Inside it, an image formed, a face similar to Zix but older, with deeper blue skin and eyes that shone like starlight. "I am Archive Keeper Nix," the face said. "You hold my child's emergency beacon. Where is Zix?" Jake's throat tightened as he remembered what had happened. The hunters. They caught them. Some kind of liquid metal covered Zix and phase capture technology. Nix's expression darkened, the lights around them turning deep purple. They're being taken to the collection ship. Their silver eyes studied Jake carefully. "You tried to help my child." "I did, but I failed." Jake's voice cracked. "The crystal. It brought me here instead of helping them." "The crystal did exactly what it was meant to do," Nix said. "It protected the one thing that could still save Zix. You." "Me? But I'm just human." "Exactly." The lights swirled faster. "The collectors have never successfully contained a human mind before. Your ability to imagine, to dream, it interferes with their containment technology. That's why they've never been able to add humans to their collection." Jake floated closer to the light sphere. "So how does that help Zix?" "Because," Nex's eyes glowed brighter, "we're going to use that unique human ability of yours." But first, the rainbow lights began concentrating around Jake's body. "You'll need some upgrades." Tiny crystals started forming on Jake's skin like diamond frost. Where they touched, he felt strange energy flowing into him. "What's happening to me?" He watched in amazement as the crystals spread across his arms, creating patterns similar to the circuits he'd seen under Zix's skin. "We're giving you access to luminary technology," Nix explained. "The ability to phase through matter, manipulate energy, and most importantly," the crystals reached Jake's face, tingling as they formed around his eyes. "The power to see the quantum threads that connect all things." Jake's vision suddenly exploded with new information. He could see strands of light connecting everything, flowing like rivers of energy through reality itself. "The collectors think they're studying us," Nix continued, "but we've been studying them too. Their ship is in Earth's orbit, hidden from human technology. The liquid metal hunters are just drones, controlled from the ship." "How do we get there?" Jake asked, flexing his crystallized hands which now glowed with a faint blue light. "The hard way." Nix's image smiled. "We're going to use the hunters' own teleport signal to trace back to their ship. But for that, the space around them began to shift. We need to get their attention again." The crystal space started dissolving, reality bleeding back in. Jake found himself standing on the school roof, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of red and gold. His body still sparkled with crystalline patterns, now hidden just beneath his skin. "Remember," Nex's voice echoed in his mind through the crystals. "The collectors can't handle imagination. When you face them, don't think in straight lines. Dream. Create. Imagine the impossible." In the distance, Jake saw 3 liquid metal shapes flowing up the side of the school building. The hunters had found him again. "One more thing," Nix added as the hunters approached. "The crystals will let you do something else, something we discovered humans are particularly good at." "What's that?" Jake asked, watching the hunters spread out to surround him. "Making friends with their worst enemies." The hunters' red eyes fixed on Jake, their metal bodies rippling with anticipation. But now, with his enhanced vision, Jake could see something else. Thin streams of light flowing from the hunters up into the sky, leading to something massive hidden in orbit. And inside each hunter's flowing metal form, he saw something that made his heart skip. Tiny sparks of consciousness, like trapped fireflies desperate to be free. The hunters weren't just drones. They were prisoners too. Jake smiled as the crystals in his body began to glow brighter. "Don't worry, Zix," he whispered. "I'm coming, and I'm bringing help." The hunters lunged at him from 3 directions, their metal bodies stretching like liquid silver in the sunset. But Jake wasn't afraid anymore. He had imagination on his side, and he was about to teach these collectors what human dreams were really capable of. The hunters' liquid metal bodies crashed into Jake from 3 directions, but passed right through him like smoke. The crystalline patterns under his skin flared bright blue as he instinctively phased, just like Zix had done earlier. "That's it," Nex's voice echoed in his mind. "Now see the threads that control them." Jake's enhanced vision revealed glowing strands stretching from each hunter up into the sky. But more importantly, he could now see the trapped consciousness inside each hunter, swirling balls of light, each a different color, pulsing with what felt like fear. "They're scared," Jake whispered. "The hunters, they're being controlled." The closest hunter reformed and lunged again. This time, Jake didn't phase. Instead, he reached out and touched its liquid metal surface. The crystals in his hand resonated with the trapped light inside. Instantly, his mind filled with images, memories that weren't his own. He saw a beautiful world of living crystal, where beams of pure energy danced through the air. He saw the collector's ship arriving, capturing these energy beings, forcing them into liquid metal bodies. "They're like Zix's people," Jake gasped. "But different. Energy beings." The hunter froze at his touch, its red eyes flickering between their programmed red and their natural crystal blue. The other 2 hunters backed away, their metal forms rippling with confusion. "The collectors trap different species inside these metal shells," Nix explained. "Forces them to hunt others. But your human ability to imagine, you can help them remember who they really are." Jake closed his eyes, concentrating. The crystals in his body hummed with energy as he did something that felt natural yet impossible. He began to dream while awake, projecting his imagination through the crystalline network. He imagined the hunters free, imagined their true forms of light and energy. In response, the liquid metal began to crack, revealing glowing light beneath. "No." A new voice boomed from above, harsh, mechanical, and ancient. "Our specimens are our property." The sky rippled like a disturbed pond, and a massive shape appeared. The collection ship, finally revealing itself. It was like a giant silver tree made of flowing metal, with thousands of pods containing captured beings glowing along its branches. There, Jake spotted one pod glowing with familiar blue light. Zix. But the collectors weren't giving up. Metal tentacles shot down from the ship, wrapping around the hunters, trying to reinforce their control. That's when Jake had an idea. A crazy, impossible, human idea. "You say humans are dangerous because we can imagine," he shouted at the ship. "Want to see how dangerous?" He pressed his crystallized hands against the roof and closed his eyes. The crystals Nex had given him connected with the school building structure, and Jake began to dream. He imagined the school transforming, the building's matter rearranging according to his impossible vision. Brick and metal groaned as reality bent to match his dream. The school began to change, walls flowing like water, windows melting and reforming. Within seconds, the entire building had become a giant crystalline hand, reaching up toward the collection ship. "Impossible." The collector's voice boomed. "Human minds cannot affect physical reality." "We can now," Jake grinned. The crystals in his body were blazing with light. "And here's another thing humans are good at, breaking rules." He reached out to the 3 hunters, no longer fighting their metal forms but embracing them, incorporating them into his impossible dream. Their liquid metal bodies began to flow upward, joining with the crystalline hand, forming a shimmering bridge straight to the ship. "Now," Jake whispered to the trapped energy beings inside the hunters, "let's go save our friends." The crystalline hand surged upward, carrying Jake on a wave of liquid metal and light, straight toward the pod where Zix was held. Behind him, more pods were starting to crack as his wild dreams spread through the ship's systems, infecting the collector's perfect, logical world with impossible human imagination. And in the chaos of breaking pods and freed specimens, Jake heard Nix laughing in his mind. "That's the thing about dreams," Nix said. "They're contagious." The collection ship's perfect metal surface began to crack, revealing rainbow lights beneath. Thousands of dreams, all breaking free at once. Jake reached toward Zix's pod, the crystals in his hand pulsing with power. "Hold on, friend," he whispered. "The real impossible part is just beginning." The collection ship's surface crumbled under Jake's touch, his human dreams spreading through its systems like wildfire. Each crack released bursts of light, freed specimens from 1,000 worlds, their dreams joining his, making the impossible even more impossible. But the collectors weren't finished. The ship's entire surface transformed into a whirlpool of liquid metal, trying to drown Jake's crystal bridge. "Your imagination is strong," the collector's voice thundered, now speaking from everywhere at once. "But we have collected dreams for millennia. Let us show you what they can do in our hands." The liquid metal rose up, forming into monstrous shapes, creatures from nightmares across the galaxy, all the dark dreams the collectors had gathered. They had teeth made of shadow and eyes of frozen time. Jake stumbled back as the crystal bridge began to crack. "Nix, they're using dreams against us." "No," Nix's voice was calm in his mind. "They're using memories of dreams. That's their weakness. Memories are fixed. Dreams are alive. Show them what a living dream can do." Jake looked at Zix's pod, still just out of reach. Inside, his friend's blue light flickered weakly. Around him, the nightmare creatures closed in, their forms shifting between horrors. Then Jake remembered something from chemistry class, how Zix had used simple sodium to fight complex alien technology. Sometimes the simplest dreams were the strongest. He closed his eyes and dreamed a child's dream. Pure, simple, powerful. He imagined light that pushed away darkness, friendship that defeated fear, colors that danced through the stars. The crystals in his skin resonated with the dream's simple power. Where the nightmare creatures touched him, they began to transform. Their darkness turned to rainbow light. Their frozen eyes melted into streams of living color. "What is this?" The collector's voice shook. "These dreams have no logic, no pattern." "That's because they're not meant to," Jake laughed. "They're just fun." He pressed his hand against Zix's pod, no longer trying to break it with force, but sharing his joy of simple dreams. The pod's surface began to bubble like soap, reflecting rainbow patterns. Inside, Zix's eyes opened, meeting Jake's. Their silver gaze widened as they understood. Together, they dreamed. The collection ship shuddered as two minds dreamed as one. Human imagination merging with luminary light. The ship's metal surface began transforming into bubbles, each one containing a piece of freedom. The freed energy beings from the hunter drones joined in, adding their own dreams. Then more specimens broke free, until thousands of minds were dreaming together, each adding their own impossible ideas to the mix. The collector's perfect world of categorized specimens dissolved into a symphony of shared dreams. Their liquid metal technology transformed into sheets of flying fish, swimming through space. Their containment pods became floating gardens of crystal flowers. Their nightmare creatures turned into puppies made of starlight. "Stop this," the collectors pleaded. "You're ruining millions of years of perfect order." Actually, Jake grinned as Zix's pod finally dissolved, letting his friend float free. "We're waking everything up." Zix grabbed his hand, their blue light pulsing strong again, ready to show them what a real dream looks like. Jake nodded. "Let's give them something they'll never be able to classify." Together, they reached out to every freed being, every transformed piece of the ship, every strand of light and dream. And as one, they all dreamed of home. The collection ship, no longer a prison of metal, but a kaleidoscope of living dreams, began to change one final time. It was becoming something that even Jake's enhanced vision could barely understand. A bridge made of light and imagination, connecting every captured being to their home world. But as the ship transformed, Jake felt the crystals in his body growing hot. Something was wrong. The power of so many dreams was becoming too much for his human form to channel. Jake, Zix's voice was worried. Your body. It's starting to lose cohesion. Through the pain, Jake smiled. Well then, let's make this last dream really count. He squeezed Zix's hand and prepared to dream one final time. The biggest dream yet. But what happened next would change everything in ways even human imagination couldn't predict. Jake's body was dissolving into pure light as the power of thousands of dreams flowed through him. The crystalline patterns beneath his skin had spread everywhere, turning him into a being of living energy. Let go. Zix tried to pull their hand away. The dreams are too much for your human form. But Jake held on tighter, his voice echoing with strange harmonics. No, this is exactly what we need. Don't you see? This is why humans are different. Through his transforming vision, Jake could see everything now. The collectors weren't just collectors. They were the first dreamers in the galaxy, ancient beings who had lost their ability to dream naturally. They had started collecting other species trying to understand what they'd lost. You wanted to understand dreams. Jake called out to them. Then share this one with us. He opened his mind completely, letting his human consciousness merge with the dream energy. His memories flowed out. Simple moments that held the most powerful dreams. A child looking at stars for the first time. A student imagining impossible futures. A friend reaching out to someone different, someone strange, and finding connection. The collector's consciousness touched his thoughts, their ancient minds experiencing pure natural dreams for the first time in millions of years. We, remember, their voice had changed, becoming softer, full of wonder. We used to dream like this, before we tried to collect and control everything. The ship around them was now pure energy, a swirling cosmos of shared imagination. Every being inside it was connected, their dreams weaving together into something entirely new. That's when Nex's voice returned, filled with awe. Jake, your transformation. It's not destroying you. It's evolving you. The crystals weren't dissolving Jake's body. They were transforming it. He was becoming something that had never existed before, a bridge between human imagination and pure energy. Zix squeezed his hand, their light pulsing with joy. You're becoming like us, but staying human too. More than that, Jake laughed as his transformation stabilized. His body was now a shimmering form of crystal and light, but he could still feel his human heart beating. I'm becoming what the collectors were looking for all along, proof that dreams don't need to be collected. They need to be shared. The collector's consciousness rippled with understanding. Their ancient forms began to change too, transforming back into the dreamers they used to be. The liquid metal of their ship became a flowing river of dreams, carrying every captured being back to their homes. But they were no longer prisoners being released. They were dreamers carrying a gift to share with their worlds. Your detention is officially over. Zix grinned at Jake, their silver eyes sparkling. Jake looked at his crystalline hands, then at the earth spinning below. Actually, I think it's just beginning. After all, he gestured at the thousands of freed beings streaming back to their worlds, each carrying the power of shared dreams. Someone needs to teach the galaxy how to dream again. Together, Zix asked, their light pulsing with hope. Together, Jake nodded. But first, want to help me explain to my parents why I'm made of crystal now? Zix laughed, the sound rippling through space like music. Don't worry. Humans are good at adapting their dreams. Just wait until they discover they have a part energy being for a son who's dating an alien. Dating. Jake's crystalline form blushed with rainbow colors. Well, Zix's blue light twinkled mischievously. We did save the galaxy together. Seems like a good first date. The transformed collectors, now dreamers again, created a bridge of light between Earth and the stars. As Jake and Zix floated there, between two worlds, their shared laughter carried across space. The sound of dreams breaking free, of barriers falling away, of a future full of impossible possibilities. And in detention rooms across the galaxy, students of all species looked out windows and dreamed, adding their own colors to the endless growing dream. After all, imagination isn't meant to be contained. It's meant to be shared. And somewhere in that final dream, a bell rang, signaling not an ending, but a beginning.